स्टार्ट करूं?
हो
Yes.
स्टार्ट कर ना.
Okay. Sanek Guruji Vidyalaya presents 7 pillars of support for inclusive education. My name is Akshata Gididhar Khandekar. My roll number is 69. Pillar 1 is developing positive attitudes. The development of positive attitude in educators is central to the accomplishment of inclusive education. Positive attitudes allow and encourage practices which, according to Hobbes and Wesling 1998, virtually guarantee the success of inclusion. A number of researchers have found that attitudes govern the day-to-day practices of classroom teachers, meaning that many decisions about what teaching strategies to use or what sort of activity to involve children in are based on attitudes. According to Murphy, 1996, negative teacher attitude toward inclusive ones developed are extremely difficult to change. This highlights the importance of pre-service teacher education, which engender positive attitude towards inclusive education in beginning teachers. While positive attitudes may do much to promote the success of an inclusive approach, negative attitudes will surely ensure its failure.
Myself, Dubey Priya, roll number 63. So, pillar 2, supportive policy and leadership, under which we are going to study about supportive policy. There are now a number of international agreements and declarations which support inclusive education. The most notable being the 1994 UNESCO document known as the Salamanca Statement. This internationally recognized statement is unequivocal in its support to inclusive education. It has been argued that international documents like the Salamanca Statement has produced most noticeable outcomes in the move towards inclusive schools. However, while few people disagree with the positive impact the Salamanca statements and other like it have in the move towards inclusive education, Blasio cautions that declaration may create conditions for policy practice, but they do not determine them. Slay and Cook and Lindsay argue that local policy and legislation should not restrict access, but rather needs to be consistent with the international policy. However, while local inclusion policy, when consistent with international standards, can be helpful, as per Lindsay 2004, there are many instances where good inclusion policy and legislation have not produced successful. While local inclusion legislation and policy is consistent with international standards and yet still does not produce successful outcome, this is likely the result of a disconnect between the intent of the policy and the willingness of local educator to comply with the intent and spirit of the requirements. A key element is creating inclusive schools in support of school and system leaders. Anderson Lupert 2000, Lauren Brown 2001, Lorman 2001, Lorman at 2005, Lorman Raymond 2005. Conversely, even support school leaders will have difficulty promoting inclusive education in an environment devoid of supportive policy and or legislation. This sort of policy is useful for support when moved towards in an inclusive school setting by educational leaders is questioned. This implies a symbiotic relationship between school leaders.
Myself, Pranita Vasanta Khanvilkar, roll number 70. Pillar number 2, supportive policy and leadership. What is leadership? A leadership is the one who inspires and motivates action, having a can-do personality and strong leadership skills is the key of leading change. Now we are going to study about shared leadership. Shared leadership is a leadership style that broadly distributes leadership responsibility such that people within a team and organization leads each other. Shared leadership is also commonly thought of the serial emergence of a multiple leaders over the life of a team from interaction amongst team members in which at least one team member tries to influence other member or a team in general. Shared leadership is an emergent team property of mutual influence and shared responsibilities among team members, whereby they lead each other.
Am I visible?
Yes.
Siley, you're not visible and audible.
Pillar 3, School Process Grounded in Research-Based Practices. Myself, Saili Karwal, roll number 54. At the school level, there are a number of organizational factors which to be considered. There is need for innovative scheduling of time and facilities, and the need is especially acute at the grade 7 to 12. Children may not learn best in 50 minutes subject blocks, and moving from classroom to classroom. Working multiple teachers is also a practice that needs to be examined. Teachers need to compensate new roles for themselves, moving away from being science teacher to being teacher of children. In terms of other organizational factors, it is essential that children be organized into heterogeneous groups, and some schools could even consider the use of multi-age, mixed ability class groupings. Creative thinking and intelligent modifications and adaptations of curriculum in this instance can overcome many of these issues. In central questions of why we have schools and what children need to learn in order to prepare them for their life after school needs to be reversed and carefully considered by all involved in education.
Hello. Pillar 3, Classroom Processes. Another organizational factor include the need for classroom to share women and other resources and engage in a meaningful professional development. Loriman Developer and Sharma in 2005 suggested that schools support inclusive education through invisible modes of support to teachers rather than students. So under this model, is the teacher who implement most inclusive pattern, working closely with the team of therapists and consultants who's mostly stays behind the scenes in a supportive relationship. Teachers should work in differentiate teams with teaching assistants and other supporting staff. This means that teacher and assistants see themselves as being in different roles to achieve the same ends. Teachers should not be the downloading. The entire responsibility for the child's education is on assistant. Similarly, teacher should not take on this role entirely themselves and should be able to rely on assistant for help. This means that teacher assistants see themselves as being in different roles to achieve the same ends. Teachers should not be the downloading the entire responsibility for child's education on the assistant. Similarly, teachers should not take the whole entirely responsibility themselves and should rely for the help for the assistants. So this required lengthy discussions and between teachers and assistants as they define their roles within the context in which they work. So at this stage, the classroom level physical access and safety needs to be first consideration. It needs to set that access, lighting, and technology aids are fundamental. If children are even get inside the classroom doors, and some even consider the physical environment to be the most important prefer to an extra teacher. So this related to the environmental of the education climate in the classroom. Children respond well with supportive, and it is imperative that protocols and records keeping systems are established for meditation, administration, and other such important events. Teachers should also work with students to foster friendships and positive relationship between all children in the classroom. So there should be support, respect between teachers and students.
Milka Dabre, roll number 57. Pillar 4, flexible curriculum and pedagogy. The school curriculum in many Western countries present significant challenges for educators trying to implement an inclusive approach to education. There is a tendency for curriculum in today's school jurisdiction to be linear, inflexible, diverse from context, overly specific, centralized, and unresponsive to the needs of minority groups. Inclusion benefits from more child-centered modes of instruction, or even those which concentrate on relationship and the learning that occurs in small groups, known as decentered learning. CLAV calls for a reformed curriculum broad enough to suit the needs of students with a wide range of disabilities. CLAV sees special education as primarily a curriculum problem and argues that it is only through a greater understanding of the curriculum that we may hope to break through to an understanding of individual problems. Teachers today are encouraged or required to either informally modify curriculum or do so this formally through an individual program plan, while modification of curriculum to suit the individual student with a disability is a widely accepted practice. It does have its critics.
My name is Angela Lopez, roll number 76. Pillar 4, flexible curriculum and pedagogy. Pedagogy is also critical to all learning and especially in an inclusive environment. Curriculum is what needs to be taught and pedagogy refers to how the material is to be learned. Children know who is in the low group, and the stigma associated with this will likely have a negative impact on self image of the children and the low group. Secondly, this practice is hard to justify in terms of learning. Children benefit academically and socially from heterogeneous grouping. Teachers need to be flexible in their scheduling. If children are excited about their social studies project leading up to recess, it might be wise to continue with the project after recess and reschedule the conflicting maths for another time. Obviously, elementary school teachers will finish this easier to do than their counterparts in the higher grades, pointing once again to the need for schedule reform at this level. The cause of inclusion and general quality of education will be improved if teachers consider their philosophical point of view and adapt their teaching technique to be more in the line with research on the best.
There is a wide agreement in the literature that the involvement of community in school is an important element in the success of inclusive education. Myself, Mildred Machado, roll number 77, pillar number 5, community involvement. Without the cooperation and help of parents, little is accomplished. And Turnbull in 1991, followed by Leorman in 2005, have presented the roles of parent as falling into three broad categories. These include parents as decision makers. Parents are well placed to make decisions with and or on behalf of their children. They can also assist others to make decisions by providing valuable background information and insights from their years of experience with the child. Parents as teachers. Parents are often their child's only teacher in their first 4 to 5 years of life and are well in tune to the learning needs and preference of the individual. Parents can help as teacher both at home, in the community, and as partners in the classroom. Parents as advocates. It is extremely rare and unlike to encounter a parent who does not want the best of his child. Given these, parents are often wonderful advocates. Educators who recognize this are well on the road of productivity and collaborative relationship with parents. Various groups focusing on specific conditions such as autism or Down syndrome can also provide significant support and resources in order to partner with school and better enable the practice of inclusion. Many schools foster partnership with this group and others like them, and in doing so expand the responsibility of education into the community in a positive and elaborative way. Thank you.
Myself, Devendra Singh. Roll number 93. Am I visible?
Yes.
Okay. Pillar 6, meaningful reflection. Reflection has become an increasingly important part of good teacher repertoire of strategy for continuous improvement. Educators need to able to reflect and study because research-based practice is necessary if educators want to stay relevant. This value of reflection, the value of reflection is increased when it is based on data collected through systematic observation, becoming action research. A number of teacher tools for reflection have been devised. These include but are not limited to diaries and journal. Second, previously developed surveys indexing. There are a variety of available surveys and indexes which teachers can fill out in an attempt to gauge where they are at with inclusion and what aspect of their practice they may need to focus on. The British Index for the Inclusion is an example of this. Third, have a colleague review plans. Assessment, class structure, instruction, etc. This strategy can be extremely helpful, but require high level of trust is one's colleague. Visiting the classroom of others. This is a powerful approach to picking up helpful ideas, advice, and tips for implementation in another text. Often with adaptation. Indeed, classroom instructor can be one of the most important types of professional development educators can engage in. Reflective practice is often spoken of in relation to individual teachers carrying out the sorts of activities described above. However, it is important in a climate of reflection to analyze and question all aspects of the inclusive experience. This extends to schools and even school jurisdictions. This is an area where many school districts do not excel as they try and reconcile the need for promotion with the need for self-criticism and reflection. It is often the self-criticism that loses out. There are a number of things school districts can do if they want to genuinely reflect on their practice, although they may have to live with the fact that the result, while likely to help in improving district practice, may not help them with their advertising campaigns. School districts can welcome research from outside of the district.
Myself, Dhananjay Gun, roll number 65, pillar number 7, necessary training and resources. Training. For all their good intentions, many teachers feel inadequately trained to meet the demands of an inclusive classroom. Australian survey conducted by Lorman asked teachers roll number 65, pillar number 7, necessary training and resources. Training. For all their good intentions, many teachers feel inadequately trained to meet the demand of an inclusive classroom. Australian survey conducted by Lorman asked teachers what sort of training would be helpful them, and the response was overwhelmingly in favor of in-class support by professional and colleagues, possibly in combination with some school-based professional development. This group provided leadership in the school and engaged in classroom consulting and other forms of assistance with their colleagues. University professionals deliver the course content on-site at school after instructional hours, and the academic content was modified to be directly applicable. Addressed need for training to be immediately relevant to the educational context in which teachers were working. Resources. A perception is that schools are inadequately resourced to meet the demand of inclusive education. Technology is commonly used resource and has opened up wealthy of opportunity for many students. However, it should be used judiciously. The importance of presence of adequate resources in a school cannot be dismissed. According to Yuba, inclusive school practices in relation with the prioritizing of school resources can have powerful differential